In today's episode of Millionaire Love Stories, meet Henry Blackwood, a brilliant but untouchable CEO who hasn't allowed a single human hand to brush his in 2 decades. When his bold, no-nonsense assistant Sophia Carter steps into his world, everything changes. Is she the one to break his unyielding rules and uncover the man beneath the armor? This isn't just a story about wealth and power. It's a story about breaking walls, facing fears, and discovering that sometimes, letting go is the greatest risk of all. After 20 years of shunning human touch, the enigmatic millionaire CEO Henry Blackwood meets his match in Sophia Carter, his spirited new assistant who refuses to play by his rules. As Sophia's persistence wears down his carefully constructed barriers, Henry finds himself grappling with buried fears, a forgotten past, and a longing he never thought he'd feel again. Through moments of tension, humor, and undeniable connection, the once untouchable businessman learns that letting someone in might just be the most powerful deal of his life. Hello everyone, I'm the narrator. Today, I bring you a millionaire love story. A love that rises above all challenges, where hearts find each other in a world of luxury. True wealth isn't just money. It's love that lasts. Do you believe in destined love? If so, like, share, comment, and subscribe to Millionaire Love Stories for more heart-touching stories. Now, let's step into this story together. Introduction. A millionaire CEO hadn't touched a woman in 20 years. But his new assistant changed everything. Henry Blackwood, the untouchable CEO. Henry Blackwood was more than just a billionaire CEO, he was a legend. A ruthless businessman, a financial genius, and a man who had built an empire with nothing but sharp instincts and unshakable discipline. But for 20 years, Henry had followed one unbreakable rule. He never touched women. Not a handshake, not a casual brush against someone in a crowded room, not even the most accidental contact. People whispered about it in the hallways of Blackwood Enterprises. Some assumed it was just another eccentricity of the rich. Others speculated about a dark past, some trauma buried deep within him. But whatever the reason, nobody dared to test it. Until she came along. Sophia Carter, the assistant who didn't care about rules. Sophia Carter entered Blackwood Enterprises with a hot cup of coffee, a stack of files, and an attitude that suggested she wasn't easily intimidated. She was Henry's new personal assistant, and she had no idea about his rule. That morning, when she walked into Henry's office to hand him a report, he didn't even look up from his laptop. "Leave it on the desk," he muttered, his voice clipped and businesslike. Sophia frowned. She didn't like being treated like a walking clipboard. "We have a meeting at 10 a.m. Do you want coffee?" she asked. Standing her ground, Henry finally glanced up, his stormy gray eyes meeting hers. "I don't drink coffee." Sophia smirked. "Tea, then? Water? Or do you survive on oxygen in stock market chaos?" The room froze. Nobody spoke to Henry Blackwood like that. But Sophia did. And for the first time in years, Henry found himself paying attention. The moment that changed everything. It happened on her 3rd day at Blackwood Enterprises. "Henry needs a tie, now." Emma, the CEO's executive secretary, rushed over to Sophia's desk. Sophia blinked. "A tie? He has a meeting in 5 minutes. And he forgot to bring one." That sounded ridiculous for a man as meticulously put together as Henry Blackwood. But Sophia didn't question it. She grabbed a handful of ties from the wardrobe in his dressing room and hurried into his office. Henry stood in front of a mirror, his white dress shirt perfectly pressed, his sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal strong forearms. He looked at her, mildly annoyed. "You brought all of them?" Sophia shrugged. "Didn't know what color you'd want." Henry sighed, grabbed a tie at random, and started putting it on. And that's when she saw it. He was doing it wrong. Badly. Every successful businessman knew how to tie a tie. But Henry Blackwood, the man who could negotiate billion-dollar deals in his sleep, was completely butchering the process. "Are you trying to strangle yourself?" Sophia blurted out. Henry shot her a sharp glare. Without thinking, Sophia stepped forward and reached for the tie, her fingers brushing against his skin. And that's when everything changed. The first touch in 20 years. The moment Sophia's fingers grazed his neck, Henry froze, his entire body locked up. Sophia, unaware, simply focused on fixing the tie. But within seconds, she felt it, the tension in his posture, the way his breathing changed. And then, suddenly, Henry jerked away as if he'd been burned. "Don't touch me," he snapped. Sophia blinked, startled. "Excuse me?" Henry took a step back, his hands clenched into fists. "Never do that again." Sophia stared at him, utterly confused. "Okay, it's just a tie, not a loaded gun," she muttered. Henry could still feel the warmth of her fingers on his skin. It wasn't disgust, it wasn't revulsion, it was fear. For the first time in 20 years, a woman had touched him. And for some reason, this time, it felt different. The assistant who wouldn't back down. Sophia crossed her arms, studying him. "All right, fine, I won't touch you again. But I will figure out why you're acting like I just stabbed you." Henry's jaw tightened. "You don't need to figure out anything." Sophia smirked. "Oh, but I'm curious. And once I get curious, I don't stop." She turned and walked out, leaving Henry standing there, his chest rising and falling too fast. His mind racing, his carefully built walls cracking just a little bit. For 20 years, nobody had touched him. And now, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The beginning of a dangerous game. From that day on, Sophia Carter became the biggest problem in Henry's life. She wasn't afraid of him. She didn't care about his rules. And worst of all, she made Henry want to break every single one of them. Sophia Carter wasn't just an assistant. She was a storm. And she was about to destroy every wall Henry Blackwood had spent 20 years building. Session 1. Breaking the first rule. The moment Sophia Carter walked into Henry Blackwood's office on Monday morning, she knew something was off. The atmosphere in the Blackwood Enterprises executive suite was usually tense. Everyone walked on eggshells around the CEO. But today, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. She ignored it. After all, she had a job to do. Sophia strolled up to Henry's desk, a steaming cup of black coffee in one hand and a stack of reports in the other. "Morning, boss." Henry didn't look up. His fingers were poised over his laptop keyboard, his expression severe and unreadable. Sophia sighed and dropped the files onto his desk. "Quarterly reports. All the data is clean. But your finance team is so dull I almost fell asleep reading them." Still, no reaction. Sophia tilted her head. "Okay, what's wrong with you?" Henry froze for a second, as if debating whether to answer. Then, without a word, he grabbed the files and flipped through them. Sophia crossed her arms. "Oh, so we're doing the silent treatment today? Great, I'll just stand here and guess." I said, "Don't touch me." Henry cut in, his voice low but sharp. Sophia blinked. "That's what this is about?" Henry finally looked up, his stormy gray eyes locking onto hers. "Yes," she scoffed. "You're still mad about the tie thing? That was 3 days ago." Henry clenched his jaw. "It doesn't matter when it happened." Sophia narrowed her eyes. "Okay, explain it to me, because from where I'm standing, I touched you for 2 seconds. And you acted like I stabbed you." Henry inhaled sharply, his entire body stiff as a statue. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the truth was more complicated than he wanted to admit. For 20 years, he had avoided physical contact with women, by choice. And then Sophia touched him. And instead of disgust, instead of panic, instead of the usual icy detachment, he felt something else. Something dangerous. Something he didn't want to name. Sophia exhaled and shook her head. "Look, I don't know what kind of weird Batman-level trauma you have. But I wasn't trying to invade your personal space. I was fixing your tie because you were doing it wrong." Henry's brow furrowed. "I wasn't. You were." Sophia interrupted. It was painful to watch. Henry's nostrils flared slightly, but he said nothing. Sophia smirked. "Oh, so Mr. Billionaire Genius can close multi-million-dollar deals in his sleep. But he can't tie a simple Windsor knot?" Henry's jaw clenched. Damn her. She was the first person in years who wasn't afraid to challenge him. That should have been infuriating. Instead, it was something else. Something he refused to acknowledge. The office whispers. When Sophia left Henry's office, the entire administrative team was staring at her. A blonde woman, Emma, the CEO's executive secretary, approached with a mixture of pity and shock. "You touched him?" she whispered. Sophia frowned. "Oh my God, why is this a thing?" Emma gasped. "It's been 20 years since anyone dared to touch Henry Blackwood." Sophia rolled her eyes. I didn't dare anything. I was fixing his tie. A male voice snickered from the side. Max Dawson, the head of finance, was sipping his coffee, looking highly entertained. Well, Sophia, Max said, grinning, if you live to see another day, we'll know if he secretly liked it. Sophia raised an eyebrow. You all act like he's a vampire who bursts into flames when touched. Max shrugged. Maybe he is. Maybe you should try it again and see what happens. Sophia shook her head and walked toward her desk, ignoring the whispers and knowing glances. She wasn't here to gossip. She was here to do her job. And if Henry Blackwood thought he could intimidate her, he had another thing coming. Henry's unspoken war. Inside his office, Henry sat completely still, staring at his laptop screen without actually reading a single word. His fingers subconsciously grazed the spot on his neck where Sophia had touched him. It had been 3 days, and he could still feel it. That was a problem, because it meant that, despite all his rules and restrictions, despite 2 decades of keeping every woman at a distance, one stubborn, impossible, sharp-tongued assistant had just wiped away 20 years of control with a single touch. Henry exhaled slowly. This couldn't happen again. He wouldn't let it. The test. That afternoon, Henry did something completely out of character. He tested himself. Sophia was in the conference room, focused on her laptop, typing something. Henry walked in with a report in his hand. She looked up, arching an eyebrow. Back so soon, boss? Henry didn't respond. He simply placed the report directly into her hands, letting his fingers barely graze hers. The moment their skin touched, his breath hitched, but he didn't pull away. Sophia frowned. Are we having a staring contest? Henry clenched his jaw. No reaction, no reaction, no reaction. He forced himself to act normal and said, fix the figures on page 3. Then, he turned and walked out. Sophia stared after him, confused, because for some reason, that felt like a test. The beginning of the end. That night, Henry sat alone in his penthouse, staring at his untouched whiskey. His plan had failed. Instead of proving that Sophia's touch meant nothing, he had just confirmed that it meant everything. And the worst part? He wanted more. But that was impossible. Because if he let himself fall, there would be no going back. And Henry Blackwood never lost control. Until now. Session 2. Unraveling Control. Henry Blackwood didn't lose control. Ever. Yet, he had spent the past 24 hours thinking about Sophia Carter's touch. He hated it. No, he hated himself for letting it get to him. Sitting in his office, Henry gripped his pen so tightly his knuckles turned white. He needed to reset, reassert control, remind himself who he was. Because this wasn't happening. It couldn't happen. His past had ensured that. The avoidance strategy. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the office, coffee in hand, ready for battle. But Henry? Nowhere to be found. She frowned, checking the time. 8:55 a.m. He was always here before anyone else. Always. At 9:15, his secretary, Emma, rushed past. Where's Henry? Sophia asked, confused. Emma sighed. Apparently, he's working from home today. Sophia narrowed her eyes. Working from home? Henry Blackwood lived in his office. This was an escape tactic. A petty, ridiculous, obvious avoidance move. She smirked. Well. Max Dawson appeared next to her, sipping his coffee like it was popcorn at a movie. The king has retreated? Max quipped. Looks like it. Max grinned. And let me guess, you're going to poke the bear. Sophia grinned back. I'm considering it. Henry's failed escape. At precisely 10:42 a.m., Henry Blackwood's phone buzzed. It was a text from Sophia. Sophia. Running from your assistant. Boss? That's weak. Sophia. FYI. I'm using your office chair while you're gone. It's comfy. Henry inhaled sharply. She was mocking him. Henry. Get out of my chair. Sophia. Make me. Henry clenched his jaw. She was impossible. She wasn't supposed to be this confident with him. Most people tiptoed around him like he was a ticking bomb. But Sophia? She poked. She pushed. She dared him. And the worst part? He liked it. The next move. Henry returned to the office the next day. Because he wasn't a coward. Because Sophia Carter wasn't going to win. When he walked in, the entire office froze. Max whistled under his breath. The king has returned. Sophia looked up from her laptop, smirking as if she'd already won a battle. "Welcome back, boss," she said smoothly. Henry ignored the way her voice did something to his pulse. He nodded and strode past her without a word, heading into his office and slamming the door shut. The war had begun. The coffee incident. Sophia didn't actively push Henry. Okay, maybe she did. Just a little. On Thursday morning, she placed his usual black coffee on his desk. The same way she always did. But this time, she added sugar. She stood by his desk, waiting as he took a sip. The second the coffee hit his tongue, he froze. Slowly, he looked up at her. Sophia grinned, all innocence. Problem? Henry swallowed, his eye twitching. This has sugar. Sophia gasped dramatically. Oh no, you mean you're human and enjoy nice things? Henry placed the cup down with excruciating calmness. I drink my coffee black. Sophia shrugged. Tough. It's a free upgrade. Henry exhaled through his nose, staring at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Finally, he pushed the cup away. Sophia grinned in victory. Max leaned in from a nearby desk, whispering, "That was reckless." Sophia sipped her own coffee. It was necessary. The dinner invitation. That evening, Henry sat in his penthouse, staring at his whiskey glass. He was losing. Not in business, not in power, but in something worse. Control over himself, over her, over whatever this was becoming. His phone buzzed. Sophia. You're going to dinner with me tomorrow. Henry. No, I'm not. Sophia. Yes, you are. Henry. Give me one good reason. Sophia. Because you need to learn how to be a human again. Henry stared at the screen. And then? He made the worst decision of his life. Henry. 7 p.m. Don't be late. The dinner test. The next night, Henry arrived first. He was at a private rooftop restaurant, dressed in his usual perfectly tailored suit. He was in control, until she walked in. Sophia Carter, wearing a black dress that was simple, elegant, and effortlessly stunning. Henry forgot how to breathe for 2 seconds. She approached the table, smirking like she had already won. Henry cleared his throat. You're late. Sophia shrugged. Traffic. They sat down, and the real test began. The conversation that changed everything. Over dinner, Sophia wasn't subtle. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. So, Henry. His eyes flicked to hers. What's your deal? She asked. Henry stiffened. Excuse me? Why don't you touch people? Henry's grip tightened on his fork. Sophia didn't back down. I mean, you're rich, powerful, intimidating as hell, but no one ever touches you. Why? Henry looked away, his jaw like stone. Drop it, he said quietly. No, Sophia countered. Henry turned his eyes back to her. Slowly, dangerously. You're pushing too far. Sophia didn't flinch. She simply smiled. I'm just trying to figure out what you're so afraid of. Henry exhaled sharply. And for the first time, he said something he never planned to admit. It's not fear. Sophia tilted her head. Then what is it? Henry leaned forward, his voice low, his eyes locked on hers. Control. Silence stretched between them. For once, Sophia didn't have a comeback. Henry watched her, waiting, because for the first time in 20 years, someone had gotten dangerously close to the truth. And he wasn't sure how to stop her. The beginning of the fall. That night, Henry walked Sophia to her car. As she unlocked the door, she turned to him, smirking. So, was this painful for you, boss? Henry gave her a rare, almost smile. I survived. Sophia laughed. Good. She stepped into the car but paused, glancing up at him. Careful, Henry. His brow lifted. Of what? Sophia's smirk softened just a little. You're starting to like me. Henry Blackwood stood in silence as she drove away. Because for the first time, he couldn't deny that she might be right. Session 3. Breaking the rules. Henry Blackwood had one rule. One simple, unbreakable, ironclad rule. No touching. Yet here he was. Less than a month into knowing Sophia Carter, and she had already wrecked his entire system. The worst part? He didn't hate it. The aftermath of dinner. The morning after their dinner. Henry arrived at the office, determined to reclaim his control. Sophia was already there, sitting at her desk, drinking her coffee, smirking like she knew exactly what she'd done to him. Henry ignored her and went straight to his office. 5 minutes later, his phone buzzed. Sophia. Running away again. Boss? Henry. I don't run. Sophia. Right. That's why you practically sprinted out of the restaurant last night. Henry exhaled sharply. Henry. Drop it. Sophia. Sophia. Make me. Henry pinched the bridge of his nose. This woman was impossible. A tension that couldn't be ignored. By lunchtime, Henry had given up pretending he wasn't distracted. Sophia was everywhere. Every time he walked past her desk, she'd look up at him, grinning like a cat that had cornered its prey. Every time he tried to focus on work, he'd hear her voice, laughing with Max, challenging a colleague, completely and utterly unfazed by him. And it was driving him insane. He wasn't used to people not fearing him. And yet, Sophia Carter wasn't afraid. And that was dangerous. The office collision. It was mid-afternoon when everything changed. Henry was heading toward the boardroom, mind occupied with a multi-billion-dollar contract. Sophia was heading straight toward him, balancing a towering stack of reports. She didn't see him, and before either of them could stop it, they collided. Papers flew everywhere. And worse, so did Henry's control, because for the first time in 20 years, a woman had touched him, fully, completely, and in a way he couldn't avoid. Sophia stumbled forward, hands pressing against his chest to steady herself. Henry's body went rigid. It was nothing, just a touch, a simple, human, everyday thing. But for Henry, it was a goddamn earthquake. His breathing changed, his pulse jumped, he felt warmth, contact, her, and for the first time, he didn't immediately want to pull away. The moment that changed everything. Sophia froze, too. Her eyes flicked up to his, searching, questioning. For once, she didn't smirk. She just waited for him to move, waited for him to react. And Henry? Henry couldn't. For the first time in 2 decades, his body didn't reject the touch. For the first time, his brain didn't scream at him to pull away. For the first time, he realized, it wasn't that he couldn't be touched. It was that he didn't want to be touched by anyone except her. And that was a problem. A huge problem. The aftermath. Sophia was the first to move. Slowly, she stepped back, cleared her throat, bent down to pick up the fallen papers. Henry? He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe, because his entire world had just shifted. Sophia glanced up at him, eyebrow raised. No heart attack? She teased. Henry finally exhaled. No. Sophia grinned. Guess I'm not that deadly after all. Henry said nothing, because he wasn't so sure. A decision to test his limits. That night, Henry sat in his penthouse, staring at his whiskey. His entire life, he had believed a lie. That he couldn't be touched. That his body couldn't handle it. That he was incapable of it. But now, he was questioning everything. And there was only one way to find out the truth. The next morning, he arrived at the office with a plan. A reckless, dangerous, completely out of character plan. And it started with Sophia Carter. The test. At exactly 10 a.m., Henry called Sophia into his office. She strolled in, completely relaxed, like she wasn't facing one of the most feared CEOs in the country. You rang? She teased. Henry exhaled slowly. I need your help, he said. Sophia blinked. That was unexpected. With what? Henry hesitated. Then, before he could stop himself, he extended his hand, palm up, waiting. Sophia's eyes widened. Henry, she said slowly. Are you asking me to? Yes. Sophia stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You do realize this is completely opposite of everything you've ever said to me, right? Henry clenched his jaw. I need to know. Sophia studied him for a long moment. Then, she reached out, slowly, cautiously, and touched his hand. Henry braced for impact, for panic, for revulsion, for anything that proved his body still rejected human contact. But instead, he felt warmth, and nothing bad happened. His breathing stayed steady. His heart didn't race in fear, only in something else, something he didn't want to name, something that had everything to do with the woman standing in front of him. Sophia's thumb brushed over his palm. Slow, experimental. Her eyes never left his. Well, she murmured. Henry swallowed. It's fine. Sophia grinned. That's it? Fine. Henry exhaled, looking away. More than fine, he admitted. Sophia's grin softened. Henry? Her voice was gentle now. Too gentle. Like she was seeing through him. Through everything he tried to hide. and that terrified him. So, he pulled away, stepped back, cleared his throat. "This never happened," he said stiffly. Sophia smirked. "Oh, it definitely happened." Henry scowled. She laughed, then turned to leave. But before she walked out, she glanced over her shoulder. "For what it's worth, Henry?" He looked up. "I think you're stronger than you believe." Henry watched her go, watched as she disrupted his world all over again. And for the first time in years, he wondered if she might be right. Session 4. Losing control. Henry Blackwood prided himself on control. Control over his company. Control over his emotions. Control over his life. For 20 years, he had lived by that control. But in 4 weeks, Sophia Carter had shattered it. And now, he didn't know how to put the pieces back together. The aftermath of her touch. The second Sophia left his office, Henry sat completely still. His hand, the one she had touched, felt warm. Not in a bad way. Not in an uncomfortable way. Just warm. And that was the problem. For years, his body had rejected any contact. But with Sophia, he wanted more. And that was dangerous. The office buzz. By the next morning, the office was buzzing. Because everyone had seen it. The touch. Max Turner, head of finance, was the first to confront Sophia. "So, let me get this straight," Max said, leaning against her desk. "You touched Henry, and he didn't freak out?" Sophia sipped her coffee. "Nope. No death glare? Nope. No immediate call to security?" Sophia smirked. "Nope." Max let out a low whistle. "Damn, you're either a miracle worker or a walking disaster." Sophia grinned. "Why not both?" Max chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, whatever it is, Blackwood is different today. I don't know how, but you've changed something." Sophia's smile faltered slightly. Because as much as she enjoyed teasing Henry, she had noticed it too. The way he hesitated before looking away. The way his hand flexed, like he was testing the memory of her touch. The way he wasn't avoiding her anymore. Something had shifted, and Sophia wasn't sure if that was a good thing, or a disaster waiting to happen. A challenge he couldn't ignore. By mid-afternoon, Sophia pushed her luck, because if Henry Blackwood was changing, she wanted to test his limits. So, at 2 p.m., she marched into his office and placed a single sheet of paper on his desk. Henry glanced at it. "What is this?" Sophia leaned against his desk. "A bet." Henry raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" She crossed her arms. "I bet you can handle more contact than you think. So, let's test it." Henry exhaled slowly. "Sophia, one handshake. One simple, normal, professional handshake. You survive that, and I buy you coffee." "You don't? You owe me coffee." Henry stared at her. "Absolutely not." Sophia smirked. "Scared?" Henry clenched his jaw. "No." "Then prove it." Henry narrowed his eyes. Sophia knew him too well. She knew he couldn't back down from a challenge. And the way she was smirking at him now? He wanted to wipe that smirk off her face. So, before he could stop himself, Henry reached out and shook her hand. The second touch. It was brief, simple, nothing more than skin against skin. But to Henry, it was everything. Because once again, his body didn't reject it. His breath didn't catch in panic. His skin didn't crawl. Instead, his brain did something far more dangerous. It memorized it. The warmth, the softness, the way her fingers fit perfectly against his. And for the first time, Henry realized, maybe he had been wrong all along. The aftermath. Sophia pulled away first. She was still grinning. "See? No explosions. No panic attack." And, she pointed at his chest. "You're still breathing." Henry exhaled slowly. "I told you, I don't run." Sophia winked. "Sure, boss. Whatever helps you sleep at night." Then, without another word, she walked out. Henry stared at the door long after she was gone. Because Sophia was right. He had survived it. And worse? He wasn't sure if he wanted to stop. A night of denial. That night, Henry didn't sleep. He told himself it was business. That he was reviewing contracts. That he had deadlines. That Sophia Carter was not the reason he was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. But he was a liar. Because every time he closed his eyes, he remembered her touch. And he wanted it again. And again. And again. The next step. The next morning, Henry made a decision. He was done avoiding this. Done pretending. Done fighting something he didn't even understand. So, At exactly 8:45 a.m., he walked straight to Sophia's desk. She looked up, blinking in surprise. "Boss?" Henry took a slow breath. "I owe you coffee," he said. Sophia's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, so, you're admitting I won?" Henry's jaw tightened. "That's not the point." Sophia smirked. "Oh, it absolutely is the point." Henry exhaled. "Just take the damn coffee." "Sophia." She laughed. And for the first time in 20 years, Henry Blackwood didn't care. Session 5. Crossing the line. For 20 years, Henry Blackwood had followed his rules. No touching, no distractions, no attachments. But in just 5 weeks, Sophia Carter had managed to break every single one of them. And now, Henry wasn't sure if he even wanted to stop her. The coffee date that wasn't a date. Sophia sat across from Henry at the small coffee shop 2 blocks from the office. She stirred her cappuccino, watching him with undisguised amusement. "So," she said, taking a sip, "what exactly are we doing here, boss?" Henry glanced up, expression unreadable. "You said I owed you coffee." Sophia smirked. "Yes, but usually when a CEO takes his assistant for coffee, there's a catch." Henry took a slow sip of his black coffee. "No catch." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Really? You're just doing this out of the kindness of your heart?" Henry didn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't know why he was here. All he knew was that avoiding Sophia wasn't working. Ignoring the way she looked at him wasn't working. Pretending that her touch hadn't shaken him to his core wasn't working. And so, he did something out of character. Something reckless. Something he had never done before. He let himself be around her, with no agenda. And he wasn't sure if that was a good thing, or a disaster waiting to happen. A game she knew she was winning. Sophia leaned forward, resting her chin on her palm. "You know, you're kind of fascinating, Blackwood." Henry narrowed his eyes. "How so?" Sophia tapped her finger on the table. "You're the most emotionally unavailable man I've ever met. Yet somehow, you keep inviting me closer." Henry stiffened. "I don't." Sophia cut him off, smirking. "Oh, please. First, you let me touch you. Then, you shake my hand. Now, you're taking me for coffee. What's next, Blackwood? A full-blown hug?" Henry exhaled slowly. "Don't push it, Carter." Sophia grinned. But she knew. She was winning. Because Henry Blackwood had started chasing her. Even if he didn't realize it yet. The slipping control. After coffee, they walked back to the office. Sophia bumped her shoulder into his. Just slightly. Henry tensed. She looked up at him, smirking. "Relax, boss. It's called casual human interaction." Henry muttered. "I don't do casual." Sophia laughed. "No kidding." Henry exhaled. "You're enjoying this." Sophia grinned. "More than you can imagine." Henry knew he should be irritated. But instead, he found himself watching her smile, and not hating it. That was the real problem. A turning point. That night, Henry couldn't stop thinking about her. He told himself it was just the coffee. Just the fact that she was annoying. Just the fact that she didn't treat him like everyone else. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. Because when he closed his eyes, all he could think about was the way she had looked at him. The way she had touched him without hesitation. The way she had laughed like she already knew she was getting under his skin. And worst of all, she was right. She was getting to him. And for the first time in his life, Henry Blackwood didn't know how to stop it. The next day, a new rule broken. By morning, Henry had convinced himself he was fine. That nothing had changed. That he would go back to normal. Then Sophia walked into his office, wearing a dress. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't revealing. But it was different. And Henry noticed. And that was a problem. Because for 20 years, he had never noticed. And now, he couldn't stop. The challenge he lost. Sophia plopped a folder on his desk. "Boss, we have a problem." Henry cleared his throat. "What is it?" She slid the folder toward him. "Client presentation. In 3 days." Henry skimmed the notes. "So?" Sophia smirked. "You'll need a date." Henry froze. Then slowly looked up. "What?" Sophia shrugged. "The client expects CEOs to bring a companion. Public image. Brand strength. All that jazz." Henry set the folder down. "No." Sophia grinned. "Yes." Henry clenched his jaw. "I'll find someone else." Sophia tilted her head. "Will you?" Henry didn't answer. Because the truth was, he couldn't imagine taking anyone else. Sophia knew it, and so, she gave him the final push. "Come on, Blackwood," she teased. "You survived touching me. You survived coffee. Are you seriously saying you can't survive one night at an event with me?" Henry exhaled slowly. Then, against all logic, against every rule he had lived by, he gave her a single nod. Sophia beamed. And Henry? He realized he had already lost this battle. Session 6. The night everything changed. For 20 years, Henry Blackwood had avoided situations like this. Fancy events, forced socializing, and most of all, standing too close to a woman. Yet here he was, in a tuxedo, in a grand ballroom, with Sophia Carter on his arm. And the worst part? He was enjoying it. The arrival. A game she loved to play. Sophia stepped out of the Blacktown car first, adjusting her dress with effortless grace. Henry followed, stone-faced as always, but when his eyes landed on her, they lingered. Her dress was simple, elegant, and far too distracting. He exhaled sharply. This was a mistake. Sophia smirked. She caught that look. "Oh no," she teased, linking her arm through his. "Is the great Henry Blackwood flustered?" Henry tensed. "Don't be ridiculous." Sophia leaned in slightly, whispering, "You're squeezing my hand, boss." Henry immediately let go. Sophia laughed, knowing she was winning this game. They hadn't even entered the ballroom yet. The ballroom and the eyes on them. The moment they walked in, heads turned. The Blackwood name carried weight. So did the fact that he never brought dates. But tonight, he had one, and she was laughing at something he muttered under his breath like this was just another Tuesday. Henry ignored the stares. Sophia? She loved them. "Boss, people are staring," she whispered, eyes twinkling. Henry gritted his teeth. "Ignore them." Sophia smirked. "That's your specialty, not mine." She was too comfortable. Henry was too aware of her. And for the first time, Henry realized, maybe she wasn't the one out of place tonight. Maybe it was him. The challenge, the dance floor. Everything was fine, until Sophia dragged him onto the dance floor. He hadn't planned for this. He had planned to sit, drink whiskey, and leave as soon as possible. But Sophia? Sophia had other ideas. "Oh, come on," she grinned. "You've survived worse than a waltz." "Blackwood." Henry stared at her. "I don't dance." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "You own a global empire. But you can't handle a little two-step?" Henry clenched his jaw. "That's not the point." Sophia smirked. And then she did something reckless. She grabbed his hand. And just like before, nothing happened. No disgust. No panic. No urge to pull away. Just her fingers laced through his. Henry swallowed hard. She knew. Her eyes flickered with something dangerous. "You're fine," she whispered. "You always were." And for the first time, Henry started to believe her. The moment he couldn't ignore. The dance was slow, measured. Henry led, because of course he did, but Sophia matched him easily. Her touch light, her presence impossible to ignore. Henry studied her, noticed the way she was watching him. Like she was waiting for him to admit something. Waiting for him to stop pretending. And for the first time, Henry wanted to let go of his stupid rules. Wanted to lean in, wanted to know what she tasted like. And then, a familiar voice cut through the room. The past that never left. "Henry." A voice purred. Henry stiffened. Sophia felt it. She turned, following his gaze. And then she understood. A woman stood just a few feet away. Tall, blonde, effortlessly poised in a crimson gown. She was stunning. She was also the only woman Henry Blackwood had ever loved. And she had destroyed him. Amelia Wright. Sophia's stomach twisted. Because for the first time, Henry wasn't looking at her. The woman WHO broke him. Amelia smiled, eyes scanning him with familiar arrogance. "It's been a long time," she murmured. Henry's jaw tightened. He nodded once. "It has." Sophia stepped back. This wasn't her fight. Not tonight. But just as she was about to excuse herself, Amelia's gaze flickered toward her. "And you must be the reason he's suddenly social." Sophia didn't flinch. She smiled, guilty as charged. Amelia tilted her head, studying her, calculating. "I must say, I'm surprised," she mused. "Henry never struck me as the type to go for someone so." She trailed off. The insult was clear. "And Sophia?" She laughed. Not out of amusement, but out of pure, unfiltered amusement. This woman actually thought she could rattle her. How cute. Sophia linked her arm through Henry's again and smiled. I don't know, she said sweetly. He seems to like me just fine. Henry stiffened beside her. Amelia's smile froze. Sophia could feel Henry's heart pounding. And she knew. This wasn't over. Not yet. The damage control. The moment Amelia walked away, Sophia turned to Henry. So, she said casually, that was something. Henry exhaled slowly. We should go. Sophia blinked. Just like that? No discussion? No witty comeback? Henry's eyes darkened. There's nothing to discuss. But there was. A lot, actually. And for the first time, Henry Blackwood didn't know how to face it. The drive home. A new revelation. The car ride back was silent. Tense. Sophia watched him, waiting. But Henry said nothing. Finally, she sighed. Henry, she said quietly. He gripped the steering wheel. I don't want to talk about it. Sophia narrowed her eyes. Too bad. Henry's jaw tensed. Sophia leaned closer. Voice softer now. She broke you, didn't she? Henry flinched. Sophia swallowed. She's why you don't touch. Henry gripped the wheel tighter. That's none of your business. Carter. Sophia studied him. Then, without thinking, she reached for his hand. And this time, Henry didn't pull away. He let her. And just like that, everything changed. Session 7. The walls crumble. The silence in the car was deafening. Henry Blackwood, a man who controlled billion-dollar deals with a single signature, sat motionless as Sophia Carter's fingers brushed against his hand. For the first time in 20 years, he hadn't pulled away. He should have. He always did. But now, he was breaking his own rules. The first admission. Sophia didn't speak. She didn't need to. Henry could feel her studying him, waiting. Waiting for him to acknowledge what had just happened. Waiting for him to admit what she already knew. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. This was a mistake. Sophia sighed, leaning back against the leather seat. You keep saying that, because it's true. She turned to him, expression unreadable. Then why didn't you pull away? Henry clenched his jaw. I don't know. It was the truth. And that scared him more than anything else. A challenge she wouldn't lose. The car rolled to a stop in front of Sophia's apartment building. Neither of them moved. Finally, she unbuckled her seatbelt, her fingers lingering near the door handle. You know what I think? She said quietly. Henry exhaled sharply. I have a feeling you're going to tell me either way. Sophia smirked. A small victory. He was still trying to push her away with sarcasm. She turned to face him fully. Her voice softer now. I think you're scared of what happens when you let yourself feel something real. Henry's fingers curled into fists. I think that's why you've built your life around control. She continued, tilting her head slightly. Because the moment you lose it, I don't lose control. The words came out sharp. Instinctive. Sophia raised an eyebrow, eyes flickering to their still touching hands. Henry followed her gaze. Then, as if burned, he jerked his hand away. Sophia didn't flinch. She just smiled. If you say so. With that, she pushed open the door and stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement. But just before closing the door, she leaned down and looked him dead in the eye. I'll see you Monday, Blackwood. Henry said nothing, because for once, he had no idea what to say. A night of restless thoughts. Henry didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, tormented by a war he never thought he'd have to fight. For 2 decades, he had managed to keep the world at arm's length. And then Sophia happened, with her infuriating confidence, with her reckless challenges, with her ability to break through his walls like they never existed in the first place. Henry closed his eyes, but it didn't help, because every time he did, he saw her hand on his, her knowing smile, her absolute refusal to back down. And worst of all, he didn't want her to. The Monday power shift. Monday morning came too fast. Henry walked into the office with his usual unreadable expression, fully prepared to pretend that nothing had changed. Except, it had, because Sophia had changed it. And when he stepped into his office, she was already there, waiting, sitting on the edge of his desk, arms crossed, smirking, as if she owned the damn place. Henry narrowed his eyes. What are you doing in my office? Sophia shrugged. Waiting for you. His jaw tightened. He hated how casual she was about this. He walked over to his desk, standing just inches away from her. I don't have time for games. Sophia leaned forward slightly. That's funny. Because you've been playing one with me for weeks. Henry inhaled slowly, his patience hanging by a thread. Carter. Blackwood. A standoff. A challenge. And then, she did it again. Sophia reached out and lightly touched his tie, adjusting it just enough to test him. Henry froze. Her fingers lingered for just a second too long. And this time, he let them. The moment he finally caved. A sharp knock on the door shattered the tension. They both snapped back, Sophia stepping away. Henry exhaling like he had been holding his breath. His assistant, Melissa, peeked in. Sir, your meeting with the European investors is in 10 minutes. Henry forced his usual cold expression back into place. Noted. Melissa hesitated, eyes flicking between him and Sophia before nodding and disappearing. The moment the door shut, Sophia smirked. What? Henry muttered. She lifted an eyebrow. You let me touch you. Henry's fingers twitched. Sophia grinned. You're getting predictable, boss. That was it. That was the moment he snapped. Before he could stop himself, he closed the distance between them, his hands gripping the edge of his desk, effectively trapping her. Sophia's breath hitched, but she didn't move away. Do you think this is a game? His voice was dangerously low. Sophia looked up at him, eyes challenging. I think you're scared of what happens next. Henry's entire body tensed, because she was right. He had spent 20 years keeping himself untouchable. And now? Now, she had ruined everything. Henry hated it. He also never wanted it to stop. A silence stretched between them, electric and suffocating. Then, finally, Henry did the only thing left to do. He leaned in, just enough for Sophia to feel it. Just enough for both of them to realize there was no going back. But before anything could happen, his phone buzzed, a reminder for his stupid meeting. Henry cursed under his breath. Then, as if snapping out of whatever insanity had just happened, he pulled away, his expression cold once more. Sophia smirked, saved by the meeting. Henry clenched his jaw. Go back to work, Carter. She laughed, gladly. And as she walked away, leaving him standing there, completely unraveling, Henry realized something terrifying. This wasn't a game anymore. This was war. And for the first time in 2 decades, he had already lost. Session 8. When control slips away. Henry Blackwood was losing his mind. There was no other explanation. For 20 years, he had controlled every aspect of his life with military precision. His company, his reputation, his carefully curated distance from the world. And then Sophia Carter walked in and ruined everything. Now, every second spent near her felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. And he was slipping. The meeting from hell. Henry tried to focus on the meeting. He really did. His European investors were discussing a multi-billion-dollar expansion plan. A deal that required his full attention. But all he could think about was the moment in his office just minutes ago. The way Sophia had touched his tie. The way she had stood her ground. The way he had almost closed the distance between them. For the first time in years, his mind wasn't on business. And he hated it. Mr. Blackwood? Henry snapped back to reality. Every eye in the room was on him. Apologies, he said, forcing his usual unreadable expression. Continue. The investors hesitated. Henry Blackwood never lost focus in a meeting. Until today. Meanwhile, outside the conference room, Sophia sat at her desk, smirking to herself. She could still feel it. That moment in his office. The way Henry had finally let his control slip, if only for a second. It was intoxicating. She tapped her pen against the desk, biting her lip. She had been testing him for weeks, waiting to see just how far she could push before the untouchable CEO broke. And today, she saw the first crack. A warm thrill shot through her. Henry Blackwood was falling, and he knew it. An unexpected text. 2 hours later, Sophia's phone buzzed. Blackwood, my office. Now. Sophia raised an eyebrow. She glanced toward his door. Closed. Something in his tone told her this wasn't about work. Grinning, she stood and made her way to his office, knocking once before stepping inside. Henry was at his desk, but his posture was tense. His hands were clasped together. His eyes locked on her as she entered. Something was different. She shut the door behind her, crossing her arms. What's up, boss? Henry inhaled slowly. This needs to stop. Sophia blinked. Excuse me? He stood, stepping around his desk, closing the distance between them. This, whatever this is. He gestured between them, his jaw tight. It stops now. Sophia stared at him for a beat. Then, to his absolute frustration, she laughed. Henry's eye twitched. What the hell is so funny? Sophia shook her head, biting back another laugh. You. He stiffened. Me? She stepped forward, closing the distance just enough. Let me get this straight. She tilted her head. You pulled me into your orbit. You let me get under your skin. And now you think you can just, what? Flip a switch and pretend none of it happened? Henry clenched his jaw. Yes. Sophia snorted. You're adorable. Henry bristled. Adorable? You don't get it, do you? She smirked. This isn't something you can control. Henry. His breath hitched. She had said his name. Not Blackwood. Not boss. Not sir. Henry. Something in his chest tightened. Before he could stop her, she reached out and, for the second time that day, touched his tie. A simple gesture. A repeat of what had happened earlier. But this time, Henry didn't stop her. He let her fingers linger. Let her tug slightly, adjusting it just the way she liked. His heartbeat roared in his ears. Then, softly, she said, tell me you don't feel this. Henry swallowed hard, because he did feel it. He had been feeling it for weeks. And it was driving him insane. The final straw. That night, Henry didn't go home. Instead, he went to his private gym, pushing himself through a grueling workout, trying to exorcise whatever the hell was happening to him. But it didn't work. No matter how hard he tried to bury himself in routine, Sophia Carter was still there, lurking in his thoughts, in his skin, in the places he had sworn he would never let anyone reach. As he stood in the empty gym, panting, sweat dripping from his brow, he finally admitted it. He was in trouble. Deep, deep trouble. Because Sophia wasn't just breaking his rules. She was destroying them. And worse? Henry wasn't sure he wanted her to stop. A decision he never thought he'd make. The next morning, Henry walked into the office with a plan. If he was going to fix this, if he was going to regain control, he had to get ahead of it. Which meant one thing. He had to end whatever this was before it spiraled any further. Sophia had just sat down at her desk when her phone buzzed again. Blackwood. Conference room. 10 minutes. Alone. Her stomach flipped. She grabbed her notebook and walked toward the empty conference room. The moment she stepped inside, Henry was already there, hands in his pockets, pacing. She shut the door. What's going on? Henry turned to face her. His expression hardened. We can't do this. Sophia raised an eyebrow. Do what? Henry exhaled sharply. You know what? She crossed her arms, leaning against the table. Let me guess. This is where you give me some speech about how you don't do emotions. How this was a mistake. And how we should go back to being strictly professional. Henry stayed silent. Sophia smirked. Wow. Nailed it in one. Henry's patience snapped. He closed the distance between them in 2 steps. Hands gripping the edge of the table on either side of her. Effectively caging her in. Do you think this is a joke? His voice was low. Dangerous. Sophia's breath hitched. But she held her ground. I think you're lying to yourself. Henry's jaw clenched. I don't lie. Sophia lifted an eyebrow. Then prove it. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Charged. And then, Henry did the one thing he swore he wouldn't do. He grabbed her, one hand on her waist, one hand tangling in her hair. And then, he kissed her. Not a careful, hesitant kiss. No. This was raw. Desperate. Like a man who had been starving for something he hadn't let himself taste in 20 years. Sophia melted into him, fingers gripping his shirt, pulling him closer. The world faded. Nothing else existed. Nothing except her. When they finally broke apart, Henry was breathing hard. His forehead rested against hers. And for the first time in his life, Henry Blackwood had no idea what the hell he was supposed to do next. Session 9. A point of no return. Henry Blackwood had lost. There was no other way to put it. For 20 years, he had built walls, fortified himself against weakness, against vulnerability, against this. And now, with Sophia Carter still in his arms, breathless from their kiss, he knew there was no going back. The moment after, the silence between them was thick. Henry's hands were still on her waist, his heartbeat thundering in his chest. Sophia blinked up at him, her lips still parted, cheeks flushed. And then, she smirked. Well, she said, Voice light, teasing, dangerous. That's one way to call a meeting. Henry's jaw clenched. He should step back. He should regain control. He should say something to put this fire out before it burned them both alive. But instead, he kissed her again. This time, there was no hesitation, no second guessing, just heat, just him, just her, just everything he had been trying to ignore. Sophia gasped against his lips, her hands gripping his shoulders, pulling him closer. Henry growled, pressing her back against the table, deepening the kiss until he could no longer tell where he ended and she began. She tasted dangerous. She felt dangerous. And yet, he couldn't stop. When reality strikes, the sound of a phone vibrating somewhere in the room shattered the moment. Henry pulled back, his breath ragged. Sophia's eyes fluttered open, dark and knowing. Slowly, she licked her lips. And Henry? He nearly lost it all over again. She tilted her head. You okay there, Blackwood? He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair, stepping back like he had just been burned. Sophia crossed her arms, her smirk widening. So, what's the plan now? Are you going to pretend this didn't happen? Call it a mistake? Henry's stomach twisted, because that was exactly what he had been about to do. But then, he looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in his life, he didn't want to lie. A dangerous game. I don't regret it, he said finally, his voice hoarse. Sophia raised an eyebrow. But, Henry clenched his fists. But this can't happen again. Her smirk faltered. Let me get this straight, she said, stepping closer, challenging. You kiss me like that. And now you want to pretend we can just, what? Go back to business as usual? Henry forced himself to meet her gaze. Yes, she laughed. And not the soft, teasing kind. This was sharp, unforgiving. Wow, she muttered, shaking her head. For someone who's built an empire out of calculated risks. You're a damn coward, Henry. Henry stiffened. No, he said, voice low. Dangerous. I'm being smart. Sophia held his gaze. And then, she shrugged. Fine, she said simply, turning toward the door. Have it your way, Blackwood. Henry's chest tightened. He should let her leave. He should let this end now. He should. Sophia. She paused, glancing over her shoulder. Henry hesitated, because he didn't know what he was about to say. All he knew was, he didn't want her to go. Sophia arched an eyebrow, waiting, and Henry, for once in his life, had nothing to say. With a small, knowing smirk, she shook her head. That's what I thought. And with that, she walked out, leaving Henry standing in the wreckage of his own self-control. The aftermath. For the rest of the day, Henry was useless. Meetings blurred together. Reports made no sense. Numbers, contracts, projections, none of it mattered. Because all he could think about was her. Her laugh, her touch, the way she had looked at him, like she already knew he was going to screw this up. And now? Now, he was doing exactly that. By the time the office emptied out for the night, Henry was still sitting at his desk, staring blankly at a document he hadn't read in the last 30 minutes. This was a disaster. He needed to get a grip. So, naturally, that was when Sophia walked in. Round 2. Henry looked up as she shut the door behind her. His pulse spiked. Sophia crossed her arms, leaning against the desk like she had all the time in the world. Still brooding. I see, she mused. Henry sighed. Sophia, what are you doing here? She smiled. I was going to leave. But then I realized something. Henry raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Sophia leaned in, her voice soft. Dangerous. You're going to break before I do. Henry's breath hitched. She straightened, turning to leave. But before she walked out, she glanced back. Good night, Henry. And just like that, she was gone. Again, leaving him to drown in his own damn feelings. Late night realizations. That night, Henry sat in his penthouse, staring out at the city skyline, his mind a chaotic mess. He had spent his entire life in control. But this was different. Sophia Carter was a hurricane. And Henry? He was the idiot standing in the middle of the storm, letting himself be pulled under. For the first time in 20 years, he didn't know how to fix this. All he knew was, he didn't want to. Because, whether he was ready to admit it or not, Sophia had already won. Session 10. The breaking point. Henry Blackwood was unraveling. For years, his world had been structured, disciplined, controlled. But ever since Sophia Carter crashed into his life, everything had become a mess. And tonight, he finally accepted that there was no fixing it. The final push. Henry sat in his penthouse, gripping a glass of whiskey, staring at the city below. His mind was a war zone. Logic versus emotion, caution versus desire, and Sophia versus everything he thought he knew. She had walked out of his office tonight too confident, too sure, and it infuriated him. Because she was right. He would break before she did. He already was. And the worst part? She knew it. Henry slammed the glass onto the table and grabbed his phone before he could second-guess himself. He hesitated, then typed, "Are you still awake?" Sophia's response. Sophia had expected this. She had spent all evening waiting for Henry to crack. And when her phone buzzed at 11:42 p.m., she simply smirked. "Took you long enough." Henry stared at the screen, his pulse spiking. He wasn't used to this. This push and pull. This game he was clearly losing. So, instead of responding, he did something reckless. Something stupid. He grabbed his keys. A midnight visit. Sophia had just curled up on her couch, a book in hand, when she heard the knock. She froze. Then, slowly, she got up and opened the door. And there he was, Henry Blackwood, standing in the dim hallway. His tie loosened, his expression stormy. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Henry." He exhaled sharply. "I don't want to do this anymore." Her smirk widened. "Do what?" His jaw clenched. "Fight this." Sophia leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Took you long enough to admit that." Henry groaned. "Are you going to let me in or keep making this difficult?" Sophia tilted her head, pretending to think. What do you think?" Henry sighed. "Sophia." She grabbed his tie, yanked him inside, and slammed the door behind them. The line they couldn't undo. The moment the door shut, everything changed. Henry was on her before she could even take a breath. His hands tangled in her hair, his lips crashing against hers in a kiss that felt wild, desperate, inevitable. Sophia gasped, arching into him, fingers digging into his shoulders. It was fast. It was reckless. It was everything Henry had spent 20 years avoiding. And now? Now, he never wanted it to stop. The moment after, Sophia pulled back first, breathing ragged. She studied him, her gaze calculating. Henry's hands were still on her waist, his pulse pounding. And then, she smirked. "So," she teased, brushing her thumb over his lips. "Are we still pretending this doesn't mean anything?" Henry exhaled shakily. "I don't know what this is," he admitted, voice rough, "but I know I don't want to stop." Sophia's smirk softened. "Then don't." And with that, Henry stopped fighting. Session 11. A deal with the devil. The moment Henry Blackwood let go of his ironclad control, he knew there was no turning back. But admitting his desire for Sophia Carter? That was the easy part. Now, he had to figure out what came next. The morning after, Henry woke up before dawn, his body still buzzing from the night before. He turned his head, and there she was, Sophia, fast asleep, her hair spread across his pillow, her breath slow and steady. For a moment, he just watched her, because seeing her like this, unguarded, peaceful, completely at ease in his space, felt more dangerous than anything that had come before. Because he wanted more of this, more of her, more than he should ever allow himself. And that terrified him. Carefully, he slipped out of bed, got dressed, and left before she could wake up. Sophia's realization. Sophia woke to the smell of coffee and an empty bed. She sighed, stretching lazily before getting up and wandering into the kitchen. Sure enough, Henry was gone, but he had left behind two things. A freshly brewed coffee in her favorite mug. A note. She picked it up, reading the sharp, precise handwriting. "Had to go. Meetings all morning. Call me when you wake up. H." Sophia smirked. This was new. Henry Blackwood didn't leave notes. And he definitely didn't wait for calls. She grabbed her phone, debating whether to call him right away. Then decided to let him sweat. Because Henry needed to learn what it felt like to chase. Blackwood headquarters. Henry spent the entire morning distracted. His meetings blurred together, numbers and reports meaningless noise. Because his mind was still stuck in that damn apartment. The feel of Sophia's skin. The taste of her lips. The way she had completely unraveled him. He checked his phone between meetings. No messages. By noon, he was restless. By 2, irritated. By 4, he was debating whether to just show up at her place. But before he could, his phone finally buzzed. "Sophia, miss me already, Mr. Blackwood?" Henry exhaled sharply. This woman was going to be the death of him. Drawing a line. That evening, Henry didn't hesitate. He went straight to Sophia's apartment, knocked once, and when she opened the door, he walked right in. Sophia leaned against the frame, arms crossed, smug. "Took you long enough," she teased. Henry turned, his jaw tight. "What is this, Sophia?" She raised an eyebrow. "What is what?" "This." He gestured between them. "You, me, the fact that I spent all day thinking about you instead of my damn company." Her smirk widened. "Sounds like a personal problem." Henry groaned. "Sophia." She stepped closer. "Relax, Henry. You don't have to put a label on it. You just have to admit you want it." His jaw clenched. He did. God help him. He did. But wanting her was one thing. Letting her become something more? That was dangerous. So Henry did what he always did when he felt cornered. He made a deal. "Fine," he said. "No labels. No expectations." Sophia tilted her head. "Just this? Just this? A game. A temporary arrangement. A way to get this out of his system." Sophia studied him, then slowly smirked. "Deal, Mr. Blackwood." And just like that, they stepped over a line neither of them would ever be able to erase. Session 12. Losing control. Henry Blackwood had spent his entire life in control. Of his business. Of his reputation. Of every single move he made. But Sophia Carter? She was an anomaly. And worst of all, he didn't want to fix it. A game they couldn't win. For the next 3 weeks, their arrangement worked. No strains. No commitments. No questions. Henry would show up at her apartment, late at night. Unannounced. Sophia would smirk, let him in, and neither of them would sleep much. The next morning, she would sip her coffee, watching him button his shirt with that maddening little smile. "Leaving already, Mr. Blackwood?" she would tease. And Henry? He would pretend that walking away wasn't the hardest thing he'd ever done. Because this wasn't real. Because he wasn't allowed to want more. Until the day he realized he already did. The first crack. It happened at a company gala. Henry had been expected to bring someone. But, as usual, he had refused. He never brought dates to public events. He never let the media speculate about his personal life. Until he saw Sophia, across the ballroom, wearing a dress that made his lungs forget how to function. Laughing with a man who was not him. Henry's entire body locked up. Because something inside him, something primal, territorial, and completely irrational, snapped. Before he even knew what he was doing, he was crossing the room. "Blackwood," the other man greeted. Henry ignored him entirely. Turning to Sophia, "I need to speak with you. Now." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "I'm in the middle of a conversation." Henry's jaw clenched. It wasn't a request. She gave him a slow, knowing smile. "Jealous, Mr. Blackwood?" Henry said nothing, because admitting it would mean admitting everything else. So instead, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He took her hand and pulled her away. The fight that changed everything. "That was rude," Sophia said once they were alone. Henry turned to her, eyes burning. "Why were you with him?" Sophia folded her arms. "Because I can be. Because I'm not yours." Something inside Henry twisted painfully. Because that was true. Because this was the deal they had made. And yet, the idea of Sophia belonging to someone else? Unacceptable. "Tell me," Sophia said, stepping closer. "Do you even know what you want from me?" Henry clenched his fists. "I want you," he admitted. "I don't want anyone else to have you." Sophia's breath caught. Then she whispered, "That's not enough." Because Sophia Carter would never settle for half of him. She turned to leave. And for the first time in his life, Henry Blackwood panicked. So he grabbed her. And then, he kissed her. Hard, desperate, like a man on the edge of complete destruction. And Sophia? She kissed him back. The final breakdown. That night, Henry didn't walk away. He didn't leave before sunrise. Because for the first time, he wasn't running. He was falling. And he had no idea how to stop. Session 13. No more lies. Henry Blackwood was a man who never let himself lose control. But with Sophia Carter? He already had. And the worst part? He didn't want to stop. The morning after everything changed, Henry woke up to the scent of coffee and the warmth of a body beside him. Sophia. She was still asleep, her dark hair spilling across the pillow, her breathing soft. For a moment, he allowed himself something dangerous. He let himself imagine a life where this was normal, where she was his, where he didn't have to walk away every morning and pretend like she wasn't the only thing keeping him sane. But that wasn't the world they lived in. And when Sophia stirred, blinking up at him with a lazy, satisfied smile, Henry panicked, because the moment she opened her eyes, he knew she saw him too clearly. And that terrified him. Pulling away, Henry got dressed in record time. Sophia watched him from the bed, arms folded. "You're leaving." It wasn't a question. He fastened his watch. "I have meetings," she hummed. "Of course you do." He didn't look at her. "This doesn't change anything, Sophia." For the first time, her expression went cold. "Then why are you acting like it does?" Henry's hands clenched. But instead of answering, he did what he did best. He walked away. The collapse. For the next week, Henry threw himself into work. Meetings, deals, flights, anything to stop himself from thinking about her. But no matter how much distance he tried to put between them, Sophia was everywhere. Her scent on his sheets, her voice in his head, the ghost of her touch still lingering on his skin. And then, at exactly 2:37 a.m. on a Thursday, he made the mistake of checking his phone. Sophia's number stared back at him. And the message? "I won't keep waiting for you." Something inside Henry snapped, because for the first time in his life, he realized, if he didn't stop running now, he was going to lose the only thing that had ever truly mattered. The confession. Henry didn't think. He just moved straight to Sophia's apartment. When she opened the door, she looked stunned. "Henry." He didn't let her finish. "I love you," he said, his voice hoarse, raw, completely unguarded. Sophia's lips parted in shock. "What? I love you," he repeated, stepping closer. "I'm tired of pretending I don't. I'm tired of acting like you don't own every damn part of me." Sophia just stared, because for the first time, Henry Blackwood wasn't the controlled, untouchable CEO. He was just a man who had finally stopped running. And when Sophia reached for him, pulling him into a kiss, he knew he wasn't letting go ever again. Epilogue. No escape, no regrets. 3 months later. "Are you sure about this?" Sophia asked, arching an eyebrow. Henry smirked. "I don't do things I'm not sure about." She glanced at the extravagant ring on her finger. "That's debatable." He tilted her chin up. "Sophia Carter," he murmured. "I spent 20 years avoiding any kind of touch." She smiled. "I noticed. And now," he continued, "I can't imagine a day without your hands on me." Her heart pounded. Henry leaned in, his lips brushing hers. "Marry me already." Sophia laughed against his mouth. "Henry Blackwood," she whispered, "I already said yes." And this time, neither of them ran. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Millionaire Love Stories. Have love and resilience ever changed your life? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. Subscribe for more stories of love, transformation, and the power of connection. Together, let's believe in the magic of love.